right? We have the recording on. The folks at Ayahi, take it away. It's all yours.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So hello, everyone, and thanks for being here. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about SOMNI and ayahi as well. So Mrityunjay and I, we're going to be briefly covering an installation of interactive experiences that we put up in January this year. And again, this is going to be a very informal walkthrough. It's not going to be something that's deep dive or anything, just to kind of give you a background as to what the process was creatively as well as tech-wise. So just before we dive in, I just wanted to kind of contextualize the entire thing into this meetup. And as it was mentioned earlier, that this is not really processing oriented or P5 oriented. It's actually a more loose understanding of creative coding, where we're looking at how we can engage tech to create art. And this is in creating using lights, projectors, visual graphics, music, along with sensors and different devices and different technologies to kind of create different mediums of art, and as I mentioned earlier. So, so I'd like to have Mrityunjay come and talk about ayahi before we get into it.
So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Mrityunjay, and so I'll try and be quick and just describe what ayahi is all about. So we're relatively young. We just started in December. Vinay and I have always had this plan of starting a kind of new media center in Pondicherry, where we grew up and where we're from. And ayahi is basically the growing manifestations of that. So as you can read on the screen, ayahi is an experiential art atelier, and we are basically into the widest formulation of new media art that you can imagine. At least that's what we want to aim for. So whether that's generative audiovisual art or interactive installations and immersive experiences like SOMNI, or even we've recently even worked on some generative music videos and stuff like that. So basically anything that comes under using technology and using technology as a means for creative manifestation, that's what we are interested in. And that's what ayahi is about. So ayahi is just, as of now, just the two of us, Vinay and myself. Vinay is the expert in tech and logistics and basically how to get the thing done. And I'm the one who gives him problems by suggesting like very difficult and very, I don't even know the word, basically difficult creative ideas, because I'm a music composer. That's my scope of work within ayahi. But I find that music composition, sound design, production, it inevitably always leaks into the other aspects of creativity. So you always think about space, about time, about movement, visuals, color. So for me, it's all one multi-sensorial experience, and that's the capacity with which I engage in work in ayahi. So I think that's, Vinay, that more or less summarizes what we do, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So on that note, I will be giving a more overview look at SOMNI, and basically looking at the creative aspirations we had with the project and what we wanted to manifest. And I'll hand it over to Vinay midway, and so that he can talk about the tech and how it all came together. So the overview of SOMNI is this. It's supposed to be an immersive audiovisual installation where light, sound, and movement are supposed to coalesce into one experience. This was supposed to be for users to just walk through at their own space, at their own pace, and it housed different installations in one garden space. So a little bit of background again to SOMNI. Since we just started ayahi in December, we wanted to start with a pilot project basically. And the aim of that project was to showcase what new media art is to the public in Pondicherry, because we've grown up here and we haven't seen anything of the sort here. So we wanted to basically test the waters and see how the people react to it, how far we can push boundaries, how abstract we can go, how utilitarian it needs to be, and so on. So that was kind of the idea with which we started to think about SOMNI as a playground to get feedback for our future works. And also, like I mentioned, experiment with different experiences. Yeah, Vinay, next. So how we started conceptualizing the project is, luckily we had, through some known contacts, we had access to a very beautiful garden space in Pondicherry called Auradhan Garden. So it started basically with visiting the space, scouting the space, and obviously this was at the height of COVID. So we had a lot of things to keep in mind when designing the installation. So it had to be completely touch-free, and it had to be COVID compliant, as in we couldn't have people crowding up in the garden. So we had to keep things moving. So essentially what drew the whole experience was actually a limitation. And that's what was very interesting, because it became a creative limitation. So how do we use the fact that we can't crowd people in a garden, but yet have an immersive experience where they can take in and assimilate and interact with the art? So that was the kind of guideline for the entire thing. And it was a very site-specific approach. So before we stepped into the garden, we had no idea what SOMNI was going to be. It's only after going in, when I can go to the next slide. So we went into the garden, and we basically looked around the space and kind of listened to it. What would a person feel like walking through the space? So there was this beautiful open courtyard with the grass, and there's actually it's a performance space. So what Vinay is actually photographing on the left is the performance space, the stage. But we thought of closing that off with curtains, and as you'll see later, projecting some particle flow fields on it. And the one on the right was a potential walkway that we imagined hanging lights and so on. And Vinay, next. Vinay, more, yeah. And this was another one of the places we found while walking around the garden. And this was going to be what would be our third installation, which Vinay will speak about, where we would have tubes of light scattered all across the ground, and the users would be able to basically generate music with hand gestures, for which we use the leap motion. So yeah, go on. So anyway, after all this initial scouting and thinking about stuff, this is the kind of final layout that we came to. This was actually at the end of the process. This was the banner we put up at the entrance, so that the audience could kind of orient themselves to the space and what it had to offer. So because of COVID compliance, we had to book slots on, what was the thing called? Eventbrite, yeah. So we hosted an event on Eventbrite, and people had to book slots of 20 people allowed at a time. And these were the main installations that we had. The first one was, as you can see, the spatial flow field. It housed the Kinect and 2 projectors, and we had a particle field that people could move and interact with. And the second one was columns of light, which is those tube lights that I was talking about, but vertically put. And we had a kiosk desk with a leap motion, which people could kind of hover their hand over and control music. And the third one, which we had, was the hanging light space, which was also interactive. As people walked through it, it kind of emitted sounds and turned on and turned off, and there were these ripples of colors and so on. And at the end, we also had a selfie zone for people to, kind of wind up the experience and give us promotion on social media also by taking photos and tagging us and so on. So yeah, that was more or less the general overview of the entire thing. Vinay, you can go to the next one.
I just wanted to stress up. Could you stress upon the whole interactions and as they grew over time and the experience in that sense, the walkway part of it?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say. So apart from thinking of the individual installations themselves, we also had to consider the experience that people would have when they walk through the space. Eventually, we did market this thing as SOMNI, an interactive walkway. So ideally, we wanted every step of that walkway to be a meaningful addition to their journey. So you can see there are these glowing lights on the ground. They kind of guide the user to go through the space. So when they first come in, when you first walk into an open space, the first thing you do is move. So we wanted to take advantage of that and use that courtyard space to basically house the biggest installation, which was this particle field. And as people walked past the screen, they would discover that it's actually reacting to them. So it was not like we had a person there saying, do this, do that, though we had to do that for the first batch of people who just sat down and started looking at the screen because no one knew what it was. So we had to show them that, you can get up and move around and move the particles and so on. But once we showed that, people got a knack for it and they started moving around and kind of engaging with the art there. And after they are using their entire bodies as the first installation, when they go to the second installation, they use only their hand, which is the leap motion installation. And they're basically creating music. It's kind of like a music maker machine there with lights. And they're getting to build a composition with just their arms. And after they're done with that experience, they move through the walkway, which is again a leisurely stroll after the first two experiences. And they get to meet us on the way out and take a selfie on the way out. So we had to kind of, the way the whole thing was pieced together was considering the experience as a whole, which was, I think, the most interesting part. I mean, that's what experience design is. But it was very interesting to see how the different elements had to be put together and to form a cohesive artistic experience for the audience, not just for us in our heads, but for the audience experiencing it also. So yeah, so these were the three main installations that I was talking about: the spatial flow field, the columns of music, and the interactive walkway. And I think at this point, Vinay can speak about the specifics of each of them. After I just show you this, we made a little montage of the installation of the first 3 days. So this should give you an idea of what the experience was, and then Vinay can take over.
Can you hear the audio?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'll just guide you through these three experiences very briefly since we're running a little short on time. So the spatial flow field, as you saw, was using the body movement to control a whole particle system and in a very fluid manner. So this setup was pretty straightforward, where we had two projectors with these two screens, and we had a Kinect in front, which was basically using the depth camera of the Kinect to make sure we're getting only the people that we want. And then we had a computer running this entire, so this was running on Touch Designer. So Touch Designer is another creative coding software, which has been there since the last 15 years or so. And it's very versatile because you can incorporate hardware, you can incorporate different visual systems and sound systems as well. So what the basic formula was that we were just getting the movement of the people and using an optical flow algorithm, which optical flow is basically an algorithm to detect movement and which direction people are moving based on the camera feed. This data was then actually sourced into an algorithm, which is fluid dynamic algorithm. Again, this was not mine. This was open source online, which I kind of used. So using that algorithm, we were feeding a particle system. And this particle system, depending on the speed of the particles, that would be, of course, directed by the speed of the movement, would control the sound. So this would lead up to a parameter in Ableton, which would control this real-time sound. So as people move had bigger movements, the sound would get louder or react accordingly. Just a couple of behind the scenes. So as you see on the left, you have the two screens with the Kinect. On the right, there's a computer running this, and it was powered by a fan there. And then you have the Ableton set and the UI to control the whole experience below. So the second experience, which is a little more complicated in terms of the setup and the user experience, was the columns of music. So we had 6 LED tube lights. These LED tube lights were actually consisted of 2-meter reapers, which are fitted with LED strips. And we had a Melinex covering to create that diffusive lighting. Again, we had these were the tests from when we were creating it indoors. And we were just wanting to see how we could use these lights as an audio-visual, as a visual representation of the music that the users were creating. So this was all controlled by a custom PCB, which you'd see here on the bottom right. So I was wirelessly controlling it again through Touch Designer based on the user's interaction. So depending on which sound was being played or what is the kind of mode that we are in, as Mrityunjay will talk about later, the columns of light would react accordingly. Again, there's an ESP board just for those who are interested in that bit. So the experience-wise, there was a custom kiosk that we had. This kiosk consisted of a leap motion and an iPad. The iPad was basically a way to give information and guide the users through the experience and tell them how to use this. And the leap motion was to track the fingers and the hand movement. So we were using gestures like the pick, and even controlling by height, the up and down, left, right, and even by clamping the hands. So Mrityunjay, could you just explain a little bit about the different modes that we have for the experience?
Yeah. So initially, like I was saying that we had to take into consideration the footfall and COVID compliance and all of that while building our installations. So this was one of them where we had quite a bit of difficulty in terms of deciding what to do, because this second installation was kind of a bottleneck because it was right in the middle of 2 other installations. And this required active participation. So only one user could be using it at a time. So we had to think about ways in which we could make it linear or in a sense successive, so that once a user is done with the experience, it resets and reboots and another person uses it. So with that in mind, we kind of decided to gamify the whole experience and have different modes. Essentially, they are different in Ableton. They are different scenes that the piece goes through. So what the the installation starts out as a passive static thing, and it's just going on, giving this drone music at the background. The moment someone comes and puts their hand in front of the leap motion, it goes into mode 1. And mode 1 is basically, we mimic a kind of initializing of the system. So all the lights go brighter and it plays scene 2. And scene 2 is when they clasp their hands. And as they move left and right, we're basically controlling this particular marimba synth loop, which we had, but we're controlling the decay time of that synth. So as they go to the right, it's going to get more into a pad-like sound. As it comes to the left, it goes into a very sporadic and short sound. So this way they can actually shape the sound however they want. And the moment they release their hand, it gets stuck there. And when they swipe right, they move on to the next mode, which I think it came in the video, where the columns of light are represented by these circles on the screen. And by intersecting their hand with the circle, they're creating notes. So it's essentially like an air harp or an air keyboard. But what they're playing is a custom sound which I made, which is like a pizzicato of a string plus some other synth stuff. And I set a little scale for them to play around with. And so that way they control the timbre of it. Now they're adding a melodic element to it. And lastly, at the end, when they swipe for the third and final time, the music kind of goes into its final culmination. And there they get to choose when the music fades out. So as they slowly lift their hand, which is what is there in the last picture there on the right, bottom right, as they slowly lift their hand, there's like an entire bunch of filters that close up on the song. And after they reach a certain point, the installation just resets into the static again. So that way a second person comes and uses it and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. So the third experience was a walkway of light. So what we are trying to try to find here is how people can understand interactions. So these sensors were completely hidden. They were PIR motion sensors, and we had this whole set of lights above the walkway, and the lights actually reacted to people as they walked through the space. Now they were not knowing that they would react, that something would react. They were not expecting something to happen. So we want to understand how intuitive and how perceptive they are to that kind of interaction. And in terms of the tech bit of it, we had we used food packaging boxes to create these diffused lights, and we had about 18 of them. And we had tests. So I made a custom PCB board, which again had a Node MCU, so I could control them all wirelessly through ArtNet. And funnily, here on the left, you see a fan with the thing just to suspend it. And then Mrityunjay switched on the fan and this kind of flew around. So yeah, that was a fail. And then we had we suspended it on a mesh, like a very thin mesh, so that people couldn't also understand how it's suspended, especially at night because you cannot see it much. So it was just like these floating lanterns almost. That was the kind of effect we're going for. Yeah, again, running Touch Designer to create these patterns with the lights, with colors, and based on the PIR motion sensors. Very briefly, so we had a connection through the entire sequence of the walkway with clouds representing the different zones. So this was just a loofah, which was kind of opened up, and we just put a light inside to create a cloud in that sense. Nothing much more than that. Yeah, so this was just the selfie zone again, which was panels of cloth, and we had generative art pieces running on the background. So people could, based on the background and whatever they're liking, people could come and take selfies on this animated background. Yeah. So Mrityunjay, do you want to look at the feedback and the conclusion bits of it?
So yeah. As you can see, the whole experience that we've described really quickly now it's actually very dense. There are a lot of things happening there, and we technically had 4 weeks, I think, to put the whole thing up. 4 to 5 weeks to from conceptualizing it to getting it done. And we were so caught up in the process of doing it that we were pleasantly surprised by the response that we got. So we were like, this is, you know how it is with artists, right? We work so long on something and then it becomes so boring to us. And then at the end of it, once we were done, we expected such a huge footfall. And because people had never been to something like this before, and almost every single person who went, like 1,000 people who came over 3 nights, every single one of them enjoyed it way more than we thought they would. And yeah, flow fields were the they were the highlight of the show. In fact, everyone, the slot was supposed to be for 10 to 15 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
15 minutes, right? And then people ended up staying for an hour, and they even came back just for that. So yeah, the context of what we took away from the whole thing was that people were experiencing this, what was for them a completely new form of art that included lights and movement and tech. A lot of them they were very curious about how the thing actually worked. Whereas some, like kids, were just they just found a magical place and they're just running around all over the place. So we had a very diverse set of reactions, and we didn't expect that at all. And we saw that a lot of people had very constructive feedback also to give. So we had a lot of dancers who came through our installation, and they were immediately imagining some kind of a dance choreography with the particle flow field as a backdrop, or on themselves with like some live music happening. We even had, I think, some doctors who came who said that this might be very interesting for therapy. We had some other people who said this might be interesting for meditation. And we even had some ad fellows who were like, I don't remember what it was exactly, but they had their own applications as well. So we were just bombarded with a lot of feedback, which we didn't expect at all. And we even had a feedback notebook towards the end of the experience, which is actually very helpful. Everyone who went through there wrote a line or two about what they felt about the installation. And that's where we came to know that there was also one, if at all there was a negative or a critical review, it was about the walkway, the lights, because people didn't know what to expect of it. Because the sensors were hidden, they started walking, and then suddenly they realize that, oh, the light just turned on and a sound just played, but they don't know what caused that to happen. So there was a lot of confusion there, like confused faces just looking at each other and walking up and down back the walkway. But still, people enjoyed it. But we learned a lot from just that, and we didn't realize how much we would learn until we were done with the whole thing, because it was so fast paced. Once we were packing up and we were like looking at it in retrospect, especially now, collecting all of this and then documenting it and then sharing it with you all, we realized that it was a very beautiful experience. So on that note, with all that we learned from the first iteration of this SOMNI, Vinay, you can go to the next one.
Yeah.
So from all that we learned, we actually did a second version of SOMNI in Auroville, which is close to Pondicherry. And this time the setting was completely different. This was basically a forest in the middle of the night. Auroville, for anyone who has been or who's heard of it, is a very foresty area. And we had the opportunity to work with a really large garden/forest space outdoors. So we had to, again, reevaluate the entire installation. We thought that it would be simple just to like port the installation from location X to location Y. But the moment we went to the space, it's like, okay, this is a different walkway altogether. What do you want to put here? What do you want to put there? And how can we change the installation? And a lot of other questions came up. And this is a separate presentation altogether, but because there are a lot of changes that happened in the second version. But more or less, SOMNI happened for a second time, but with a few key differences. And Vinay, you can point out those differences.
Yeah, just very quickly, we wanted to make sure that we incorporated nature in the entire experience a lot. So as you can see, the entire light system that was in the walkway, we actually put it out into this tree here, like a branching out of this tree. And instead of using motion sensors, we were using heart rate sensors to control the experience. So I'll just like very quickly go through. It's like, this does not have sound. This was just, so this was the columns of light, columns of music, again, controlled. Here again, we had some small changes. So this is the kind of pattern that was being created based on the heart rate of the user. So by controlling their heart rate, by controlling their breath or running around or calming themselves down, they could actually control the entire experience. And again, the spatial flow field, we had a totally different canvas. We said, let's try and make it huge. We went and actually tried to project onto the trees themselves, so we could perhaps get this kind of butterfly or firefly effect, on these trees with their movement. And yeah. So yeah, this was the again, the walkway, columns of light. Yeah, I think there was two major differences we had there. Yeah, give it a close up.
I think that's pretty much it. I think we covered more or less everything that we had to share about it. We could take, if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, and just as a closing beyond the project as ayahi, we're always open to collaborations, and we want to bring this whole form of new media art a lot more into India, and we're doing it through Pondicherry, but we've seen so many people from all over the in country who have come on this. So we're always open to collaborations and always like open to new ideas or just, brainstorming something, just for the heck of it. So just reach out to us if you're ever interested in something like this.
This is amazing. Yeah, I think this is a great start for the whole processing community day as well. For a lot of people who, I think, been new to this whole field or probably think this is all about staying inside the screen. I think this really opens thinking outside the box, literally. I know there are a few questions there in the chat and I think on the doc as well. But at least on the chat, you can see the collective mind blowing that just happened. So I hope that's a testament of just how amazing this was. I'm going to ask you some quick questions, and I know we're sort of running quite late.
Sorry for that.
Yeah, so didn't want to stop you in the middle. So maybe we'll take like 2 questions, and the others I'll post them on chat, and you can maybe answer over the chat as well.
Yeah.
The first question, which is not on chat, but I really wanted to ask was, is any of this permanent installation or does that get removed after a few days? Is the
no, so this was like a pop-up exhibition. It was just for 3-4 days. We had to actually extend it by another day. But we did get, so like the one in Oroville, they had asked us if we could actually do it on a permanent basis, like the interactive one with the heart rate sensor. We haven't come to that stage yet because of COVID. It's a little slow. Things have become a very slow process. But no, we did not imagine this to be right away as a permanent installation. But yeah, it's always modular in that sense. It can be set up anyway.
Makes sense. Yeah. I'll take up one question, which was, what was the most memorable hurdle, hack, or learning that you could share for everybody else? I already see a lot of jugaading with what you did with loofahs and boxes, but something stood out for you.
I don't know, Mrityunjay, anything? I mean, there's these, exactly as you said, there's these small things which are just there. And I think a lot of it just the way that it came together more than anything else. It's, especially a lot of help from other people kind of gave us different ideas. It was not just the two of us, trying to think about it, but someone brings in an input, we try and incorporate it. And then that gives us a good way to kind of look beyond what we're doing and then also go beyond what we're trying to do and with different ideas of how to do certain things.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks a lot for doing this presentation. I think kicking it off on a great note. I'm going to ask a few more questions in chat. It'll be great if either you or Mrityunjay could just answer some of those as well. All right. With this, let's get to the second talk. I think we're going to shift gears from a bunch of people talking about like light and environment, take that environment tangent a bit to biology and bring in Archita, who's going to talk about some things with genes and how, not the ones that you wear, but like genetics and how she's used that to create some interesting art form. It'll be great to see what you've been doing, Archita. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen. I think you can see it.
You can see it. Do you want to do a full screen or?
Okay, yeah. Wait.
Click on play over there.
No, I see it, but it's hidden under that. Wait a minute. Yeah, now it's okay.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Good evening. I'm Archita. I am a biotech designer, biotech engineer, and like during my graduation, I always had this thing at the back of my mind that I would do something creative. So I joined Srishti for my master's, and it all began from there. So so after coming to Srishti, I always wanted to combine biology with design, but we were, we were in pandemic, and we were just stuck with our computer, and I wanted to take it further, but we only had this thing. So 6 months back, I got introduced to P5JS, and I thought, let's combine bio design and computation. So I thought, what if we can make art using DNA sequences? So this was my starting point. And I had to do an academic project within like 10 days of getting introduced to this. So I came up with Genotron. This would be my first P5JS project. And I took DNA sequences from genetic databases that are available on internet, and like DNA, I took DNA sequences of various animals and genetic features of animals and plants, and I combined them. So overall, I made a virtual genetically modified organism. So let's talk about a little bit genetically modified organisms. So if you have seen Narnia, there's a creature which is like half human and half horse. So this is a bit exaggerated form of genetically modified organism. But yeah, scientists and engineers have managed to make microorganisms and plants with mixed genes. And in humans and other animals, it is not being done because of ethical issues. So my output was in a pixelated art form. This is how it goes. So welcome to the lab of aspiring bioartist. Wish to make a genetically modified art? Let's begin. So we select an animal and give that animal a superpower. And then another feature, we give that to him. And congratulations, you have successfully created art from genetically modified dog that can fly and has a beak. Click next to see genetic code in pixelated art form. So this was the final artwork. And like my code was all over the place because I was really new to coding. So as any good designer would do, I made a list of pros and cons of my project. And pros were that it sparks curiosity and inspiration about interdisciplinary field of art and science. And it was an interesting tool for widening imagination. So retrieving the cons were retrieving genetic information was tough, and it has a whole field in itself called bioinformatics. And the complexity and accuracy of code was like needed to be improved. So I chose that let's focus on visualizing DNA sequences first and more efficiently. So let's talk about DNA a little bit, because otherwise it won't be clear. So DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. It is basic unit of every living thing on earth, and 99% of the DNA in humans are same, and we are all different with this 1% of DNA. So DNA is made up of nucleotide bases adenine, guanine, thymine, and cytosine, and they combine in various permutation and combination to make up our genes. So each cell has about 3 billion base pairs of DNA. So that is a lot, and like managing that kind of data is tough. So what I decided to do was, one way I could do it was using codons. So codons are basically a combination of 3 consecutive bases, like ATC, GCA, and AAT. So each codon makes an amino acid, and which makes further a protein. And we are given our features with proteins and stuff. So let's suppose A is equal to 10, and T is equal to 20, C is equal to 30. And this is how I gave each block in my code RGB value. So what you are seeing here is that each square here is an amino acid in itself, and the series of these blocks are representing protein. Okay, so next, what I did was, it was easy to retrieve COVID-19 data. So I took COVID-19 2021 April variant, and actually, COVID is a virus, so it does not have a DNA, it has an RNA, but for the sake of simplicity and for scientific purposes, it is converted into DNA somehow. So I took two variants, 2021 variant and 2020 variant, and you can clearly see the mutation in these two. So, but the thing is that a virus is a very small entity, and I was not even able to put the whole DNA in screen. So, like, going further into more complex organism would mean, taking a lot of uh, DNA and then working on it would not be possible for me. So what I thought was, what if I just take small sequences and make art using based on sequences itself. So that's when I came up with this. This is a generative abstract art, uh, and it is formed on the based on the length of the sequence, and each base pair is representing a particular color. So suppose if we have if C is red color, so we can see that there is a lot of red color, and we can automatically know that there is a lot of cytosine in this image, in this sequence. So this is actually the genes of an amoeba and a small part of gene of amoeba. So this was it, and this was a small part of fungal DNA, and this is art made from gene RHNUDX, which is responsible for roses smell. So just a minute. What you're seeing here is you can see the smell of a rose indirectly. This just keeps on going like this. And how does the future look like? Is that the biggest challenge right now is for me to compile this large amount of data and then map it in a way that it turns into art. And then I would move further to audio visual part. But imagine having art made from your own DNA, and you can visualize someone's voice, or even, even your favorite pet. Like, it can be really emotional, as well as art from like a very scientific creature that does not even exist. So yeah, thank you.
This was amazing, Archita. I think you really, I think, blew everyone's mind with the whole rose smell bit for sure. I thought this was really interesting, not just as a visual output and the aesthetic that you chose, but also the process and the encoding that you used behind it. So this was a lot of fun to hear the process and what you were actually using to make things up in the final result. I'm curious if there's any questions that anybody has. I'm also maybe just starting as a question. Are you going to post this process somewhere? Is there like an article that people can read? I know we've shamelessly taken five code and shared that once, but
I am planning to do that like in some time, because it's an ongoing process, this project. So yeah, I may put it somewhere and then I'll share it. Sure. If you want me to share it, I'll manage something. Yeah.
I think this will be great to have a documentation and then share it with other people. The fact that you picked up P5 6 months back and you have such an interesting result already, I'm like eager to see what you do in a year or two as well.
Okay, sure.
Wonderful.
Any question?
Yeah, is there any other question? There was a question on what is a codon, but I will not bother you with that. I've dropped a Wikipedia link for people who are curious about the codon. And I think they can enjoy going down a biology lesson itself. Yeah. This is great. So I think one of the breakout rooms that we'll do is going to be a bit more of maybe beginners talking about how they began their journey of P5 and creative coding. It'll be great if you hang around in that breakout room, and maybe we can do a bit more conversation about how did you start, what did you do first, etc.
Okay, sure.
Perfect. Then let's move to the next speaker, and I think we have one after another some really interesting talks. So I'm going to quickly move on to the next one.
I'm having some issue.
No worries. Take
Okay,
your time.
got it.
Yes, this works. Cool. So now we're gonna have another person who studied at Srishti. So this is another interesting representation thing. Huh? So that's great. We have
Yeah.
Chandra who's gonna talk about
Hi.
viewing with code, right, Chandra? So I'm really impressed by the topic itself. I think it's breaking the whole screen or like boring code ideas already. Take it away, Chandra. Tell us what did you do, and if you have some examples of what was the final outcome.
Hi, Rasagya. Thanks for giving me the chance to speak at PCD. I'm really excited to talk about a project I did in college. And what I learned from it. So I'm just going to try and quickly share my screen. And one sec, I'm just going to quickly open my keynote. I'm going to present my screen. Lovely. So this is a very big title. So are you folks able to see my screen?
Yes, we can, and we can see the big title as well.
Oh, lovely. And so it's about a project I did while I was an exchange student at Politecnico Milano in Italy in 2019. We were working on a sewing machine and we were thinking of new ways to interact with the sewing machine. But before we jump into that, that's all. Okay, that's like just too many big words. I'm just gonna make it a little friendlier and more accessible. Before that, I'm gonna quickly introduce myself. I'm Chandra. I'm a product designer and I do a lot of things. I make a lot of memes. I live in a slightly wild area, so I have to deal with a lot of the frogs that come inside our house. I'm taking a break from work right now. And right now I'm just exploring many things, just reading, doing research. And in my career, so I've been a researcher, I've been a designer, and until very recently, I was just doing a lot of marketing and sales for a SaaS startup. And yeah, I'm just figuring out what to do next. Meanwhile, so I was introduced to creative coding when I was in Srishti, and I used to play along with a lot of artwork. I used to, try a lot of cool animations and stuff like that. But I always thought creative coding was just that, right? It's a way to express yourself creatively in code. But then that kind of changed when this kind of changed when I went into a project, and our problem was essentially designing a sewing machine that is making it easier for hobbyists and first-time users to get into sewing their own clothes. And we wanted to improve the user experience of the sewing machine and explore new ideas. So up to that point, I thought that an interface design would only ever be something that's on a screen or something that you tap or swipe and click on. So, but the sewing machine presented its own unique set of challenges. And a sewing machine is a really interesting device. Okay, so right now, I guess in any of your households, none of you may have a sewing machine, but your parents had, your grandparents had. But there is a boom in sewing machine sales, surprisingly. That there are a lot of
Is it just me or has everyone lost Chandra's audio?
I think there's something wrong with
Yeah,
this audio.
same.
So
I was just going to check my headphones. Did something go wrong with them?
Chandra, I think your audio is out, even though we can see your presentation. Could you try speaking again? It might be one of the fancy Bluetooths trying to be too annoying. I can't hear you still.
Yeah, like last week I was doing a panel and my camera stopped working. And we did half the panel with a Sony logo happening.
Hi,
We can hear you now. Yeah, maybe this. Awesome.
yeah, sorry about this once again. This was so embarrassing.
No.
Yeah. So we kind of we interviewed a bunch of sewing machine users, and we asked them what's stopping you from using a sewing machine? What do you use it for? How is that going for you? And essentially, they found sewing machines to be intimidating and complex to use. They're very complex devices. There are many buttons and settings, and it was just they didn't know where to get started or what to do when they first saw it. So then we thought, what can we do to make a sewing machine more usable to or easy to use for people? And we came up with a design concept of a sewing machine with no buttons, no complex interface, and it projects the interface onto the fabric to help our users understand what they're doing and help them sew more accurately. Because that was kind of a big pain point we noticed in our user interviews with sewing machine users. But then how do we create that interface? How do we prototype it? And that's where creative coding comes in. So before I talk about our interface, I want to talk about how the sewing process and how it works. So it's actually, a sewing machine is actually a really, really complicated device. And it's not just one needle, it's multiple needles with a very complex mechanical apparatus through which two different strings are kind of looped together to create a strong and lasting stitch. And then essentially you can kind of manipulate the relative motions of both of these apparatus and the directions to create different patterns of stitches. So earlier that was kind of done in an analog way, but now it's been done electronically. So what we first did was we looked at the various patents for sewing machine user interfaces, right? That how do they store data on patterns? How are patterns kind of described to the user? How do they handle direction, size, and so on? So we kind of looked at what was the layout of the controls, what was the layout of the interface elements, what was the visual language or iconography that they were using. That, for example, these buttons. So I don't know if you can see my mouse, but essentially some buttons would control how long the stitch would be, how fat the stitch would be. So based on our studies of the patents of the other sewing machines of the market, we kind of also put together this lovely image from that same patent filing, which talks about how sewing machines could create various different kind of beautiful patterns just by moving the needles and the thread and the stitches in like an x-axis or a y-axis, and you create these absolutely lovely kind of almost programmatic repeating patterns, right? And this kind of blew my mind when I saw it. Like many of this stuff was like in this and this was like in the 80s. This is almost 40 years ago, and they're doing such cool stuff. And I was thinking that how can I kind of recreate this, or how can I kind of do this like in a new way? So what we did was we were looking at a user interface, and then we realized that we have a tool available to us, p5.js, which is the browser-based development environment for processing. And it's very, very powerful to kind of really mock up a basic interface and kind of show how it can be used. And so, for example, you can see here, you're editing the stitch length, you're editing the stitch width, and we were able to kind of program it so that you could so that it could be shown on a touch screen or a phone screen, and you could play with that and you could get an idea of how that could work. It was not just valuable to show as a proof of concept, it could also kind of prompt new ideas. You could hold it in your hand, you could kind of play around with it, and that kind of interactive prototype was really, really helpful for us. And then we were just thinking, but a screen doesn't work. So when you're using a sewing machine, you're kind of using your entire body, right? And you're kind of not really, and you have to focus your attention on one thing at a time, and you can't just be distracted with an external screen. And that's the feedback we got when we went to show our app to users. So then we thought, could there be a way to use gesture-based interactions to interact with the sewing machine, to select and customize the stitch patterns that they want? But then how do we mock this up, right? This is super complex. This is not just moving pixels on a screen. So we were, again, a little stumped. But then here's what we realized. While I was doing this research, I discovered this browser-based library called handtrack.js by an American coder called Victor Dibia. And what that does is that it recognizes a hand in an image and the position of a hand as well as whether the hand is open, the hand is closed, and so on. So I realized that, and you can import this library into your p5.js sketch to run it. So what I did was, and I'm just going to play this video. You can see that I was able to use this gesture-based control to change how the stitch looked, to change the length and breadth of the stitch, and kind of how I did. So this was a kind of very rudimentary prototype. I could barely get it to work as well. I have very modest coding skills. So essentially what I was doing was the image has a canvas, and you can see, and my hand occupies a X and Y axis on that canvas. And based on the X and Y position of the hand that's been detected, it would change the dimensions of this stitch pattern. But this kind of blew us away. And then this made us think, oh my God, if you can do this, what else can you do, right? And that again opened a whole new way of thinking for us in terms of what is possible, what we can do. So, and there's just a funny story. So it's not the most reliable of things. So for example, it was tracking my forehead as a hand. It was looking at my ears as a hand. So that was a funny Easter egg we kind of ran into. And it also, so anyway, we kind of then mocked up a bunch of other different interactions. What if you could pinch? What if you could zoom? And what are all the various ways in which you can customize this sewing pattern on the user interface of the sewing machine, right? But then it turned out to be very, very complex. And this was kind of beyond my capability. So instead of another P5 sketch, we kind of made a video that kind of showed what our thought process was, and how you could like edit those stitch patterns. So I'm just going to quickly play that video for you. And so yeah, there you have it. So what did we learn from this, right? So this video mockup could cover all the use cases that we could come up with, but it took too much time, and a video mockup is passive. You can't really interact with it. With a paper sketch or a mock prototype, you can interact with it, but it's not super high fidelity. It doesn't really give you the best idea of what the intended design should look like. And P5 and code gave us a kind of happy middle ground, where it kind of gave us just enough interactivity that we could understand like how viable our ideas were. So, and I suggest everyone should and P5, when we showed this to a few other people, they're like, we thought P5 was only for art. We didn't know you could prototype interactions with it, right? So we're thinking that you can use it into your own workflow. So use it as a toolbox to solve interaction problems that go beyond the screen. So because now a lot of devices are now, for example, your Alexa, Echo, your Siris, they're all moving from graphic user interfaces to voice and the Internet of Things. And also because of where design as a discipline is going, right? So I've been looking at a lot of design job descriptions, and one very interesting job description said, focus on making working software, not just artifacts that describe software. And like that kind of blew my mind. So that's why there's like a surprise Pikachu there. And it made me kind of realize when you're designing a user interface, you're basically creating a static mockup or representation, right? And there are a lot of gaps, and there are a lot of kind of potential for miscommunication or inefficiencies that kind of come through. And my thought is that tools like p5.js and creative coding can help us kind of bridge those gaps, right? It helps you give a faster feedback loop, that you have something interactive in your hands that helps you really understand how something will work. And there's also the principle of embodied cognition in psychology, that we think through doing things, that we think with our hands. We don't just think with our minds. The best way to kind of evaluate a new kind of interaction is not just by like a picture that says this is how the interaction works. It's by actually doing it and testing it out. And that's why creative coding methods might be super, super useful for that. And yeah, thank you. Here's my website. Here's my email ID. If you folks have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Perfect. This is great, Chandra. I think your project sparked quite a lot of ideas. There's one example of Mimu, which is for music production, which Bala also mentioned in the chat. I think in general, there've been a lot of good conversations in the chat, so definitely catch up on those as well.
Sure.
I'm curious if anybody has a specific question for Chandra. Chandra, are you planning to go back to stitching and actually make your project real?
I would love to, yes. Now that I've taken some time off, I finally have some bandwidth. Yeah, so I've just got all these old Arduinos and old electronics gathering dust in a corner of my house. So I'm seriously considering it.
Nice. Did the sewing machine run like an OS, or here is like, does it run through something? What was the sewing machine's like thing built?
Oh, so for our final prototype of the sewing machine, we kind of ended up only giving a basic shell with an Arduino that kind of and a servo motor that controlled it going back and forth. We didn't really put together a shell or anything like this. This was a concept, and given it was a student project, right? And we were really hitting the upper limits of what we as students were able to do or what we knew. we tried to focus more on nailing the concept and communicating our ideas. But yeah.
Nice. Perfect. I think this was a lot of fun. So I think you took us all the way back to like Jacquard Loom days and all the connections of computation with weaving and stitching, etc. So I'm hoping this is also a good segue, I think, to very smoothly move into from Jacquard Loom and sewing and some of the historical references to what's maybe coming up next. And one of the things that everybody's been talking about, and most people like me have no clue about, is NFTs. So I'm going to bring in Pixelkar next, who's going to tell us a bit about NFTs for specific computation or generative artists. And I'm hoping there's some interesting things that we can all learn from him. And feel free to ask more questions to Chandra in the chat. And Chandra, maybe you can do your magic and be more prompt in chat as well.
Sure.
Pixelkar, over to you.
Hey, I'm just sharing my screen, this one.
Sure.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see the presentation.
Yeah, I'm just so I mean there's been a lot of things which are happening with NFT and a lot of people are excited about it, and there is a lot of exciting stuff happening for computational and a generative artist in this space. So when I saw the PCD post, I thought I might have give like a basics of what is happening around. So before that, let me give an introduction to myself. I'm Pixelkar. I am a computational and a generative artist and a designer since almost 2011. In my art practice, I click pictures of the surrounding and deconstruct them with grids in the Indian art to talk about various embedded algorithms in the nature. Currently, my research has been focused on deconstructing 360 VR images into sculptures. Previously, I have showcased my work in Kalagoda Art Festival, Dharavi Biennale. I have been also featured in the Creative Indians, which is like a show on the Netflix, but it used to come on the NDTV before as absolute Creative Indian of the Week in 2016. Currently, I am a spotlight artist at Wazirix NFT, which is India's first NFT platform. So, this is, I thought this is something I can talk about in this platform. So I'm just, giving like a basic idea of what is NFT. And if you guys have any question later, then we can talk about that. So, before going into the NFTs, I just wanted to talk about this concept on which basically NFT works on. So NFTs are basically something which runs on the blockchain. So I'm so blockchain is the basic idea of blockchain came about when, in 2007, when the whole economic crash sort of came. And so there was this guy called Satoshi Nakamoto. He sort of wrote a technology which is considered as Web 3.0, where everything is decentralized. So he wrote a system where, so currently what is happening is all the data, let's say if you talk about whatever your data is with a central authority, right? For example, if your data is with Google or your data is with the Facebook or your shopping data is with Amazon, so they can possibly decide to do anything with that. But in decentralized system, what happens is it's basically a network which is made up of different nodes. So not a single authority controls it. So like it's basically a network which is controlled by a lot of people, not like a single person. So blockchains, so all of this network has been designed by all of these, it's basically this technology was started by this guy and then he termed it as blockchain. And then, so what do you call it? So in blockchain, what happens is basically called a distributed ledger. So what you're seeing it on the screen. So this is one block, then there is another block, then there's another block. So every block is sort of connected to each other. And then every block also has entry of a lot of data, which is connected to each other. And the best part about blockchain is nothing can be reversed. So once you put your artwork or anything on the blockchain, you cannot go, there's no control Z in it. So that's one of the best part. And for example, so any transaction happens on the internet, on the blockchain, that is generally validated by these miners. I'm guessing it's becoming a little too what do you call technical, but I'm just giving you like a little bit of surface idea of what this is. So to get out of this is NFTs are nothing but something which is on a blockchain, which are decentralized. That's what you should, understand about that. And then NFTs are basically they're nothing but a smart contract. So what is smart contract basically is you know so let's look at it. So in smart, so it is as equivalent as what contracts are in general, but smart contracts are nothing but which are written in code. So whatever is written in code on a blockchain, it will happen. So one of the best ideas of what blockchain is, or the NFTs are, is basically, so for example, you can write a smart contract. There is generally a smart contract which writes, for example, some, if I'm minting my artwork, if someone buys it, let's say he buys it at $1,000, and let's say eventually that particular artist the demand and everything increases, and that same artwork generally goes for $10,000, right? Or what, a 10,000 whatever rupees. So but in a previous what do you call, in the environment, in the art world, what is to happen is that artists never used to get the royalties for it, right? But because of the smart contract integration on the blockchain, what happens for the secondary sale as well, how much ever time that secondary sale happens, how much ever time you can code inside it saying that for the every secondary transaction, how much ever time it happens, you get a 10% royalty of that amount. So the artist sort of ends up getting a royalty for every sale which happens around it. So this is one of the, what do you call, property of the NFT, which is driving a lot of artists in this. So, and it's basically done on what do you call, the Bitcoin, which most of you must have heard of. Bitcoin is the first blockchain which didn't have that much of smart contract abilities. But then there came Ethereum, which is mainly, the main idea of Ethereum is to have to have a smart contract capabilities. So in Ethereum, people are creating NFTs. So the language people are using it for making it is called as Solidity. So that's what basically a smart contract is, where you write a code to get your royalties after, for your after sales. So that is what driving a lot of people there. So the next thing, so basically what are NFTs? NFTs are nothing but which are called as non-fungible tokens. So let's say if you're looking at non-fungible tokens, what that means is you cannot interchange two different artworks to each other, right? For example, you cannot replace Van Gogh's painting with Mona Lisa painting. So it's the same working like that. So they're non-fungible. You cannot interchange, like both of them are unique, so you cannot interchange. But if you look at fungible is basically you can interchange $1 with another dollar, one Bitcoin with another Bitcoin. So that's what basically the term is. So just to run you through what is basically NFTs are something which are recorded in a block, which is nothing but let's say they're nothing but which are written on a blockchain, that this person has it and then it's transferred from this person. So NFTs are not exactly, your whole data is not, your image is not on a blockchain, but it basically, NFTs basically consist of a unique fingerprint hash, or later which is called as, then it has a token name, and then it has a token symbol. I think I might be getting too technical about it, but it just in the NFTs, what happens in the block, what happens is, this is the first block, which is the transaction, which says I created this. So let's say created by a user X. And then the next block, if there is a transaction after that, which says token this sold for this much amount to the user to X and Y. So basically in every block, so in a blockchain, there's a transaction of, so there's a ledger of every transaction which is written. So that's what basically this NFTs are do. So they basically, they are, if you, so there, a lot of people might get it that sorry, your images are basically stored on a block. So generally they are not stored on a block, because it is expensive to put it on a blockchain. but they use so what is stored on the blockchain is basically that unique fingerprint hash and then the token name and the link to the file on IPFS. So IPFS is interplanetary file system, which is like a decentralized storage system for what do you call, so where your link is there in the block, and then when you click on that link, it sort of takes you to the interplanetary file system, which is like a decentralized storage system, not like a centralized storage system. So the next thing is, so NFT is nothing but it sort of represents your ownership. And then if you look at NFTs, they are nothing but they're why they're secure, because they're distributed. It's basically a P2P network. So anyone wants to get onto that network can come into it, and then it's not going to go. They're not going to vanish because it's immutable, and then it's a more secure version of it. So as a creator, you still own the copyright of it, copyright of your work. You still own reproduction right, and a buyer, he buys the original. It basically says that this guy owns the, what do you call, this guy owns that JPEG, or this guy owns that work. So that's what about NFT is. So if you might have heard of Jack Dawson, the Twitter like a founder, he sold his what do you call, his tweet, the first ever tweet, for $2 million, which sounds bizarre, but the point is it is accessible for everyone, but the buyer who owns it, he can say that I own it because it is written on a blockchain that I own that tweet. So that's the bragging right, which generally you get it with NFTs. So that's the amount of money which is going here is insane. Like if you see what has been happening in this space, it's crazy. Like I got into this NFT space almost 3 to 4 months. I started reading about it like 3 to 4 months back. I minted my work 2 months back, and then so when I entered, I started listening to a lot of people talking about, this is generative series, this is generative collectibles, and like, what are these people talking about? And then because that word was so familiar, and I was like, where was I and what was I doing? So so CryptoPunk is actually one of the first what do you call, a generated collectible pieces, which is 10,000 of them, which is generated using a code. And then if you look at the amount of money they are going, they're crazy. And then there is Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is again another generated collectible, which is been there. So I'm just going to show you one of the, so this is CryptoPunk, which is for one of the first collective 10,000 unique collectible characters, which are termed as NFTs. So if you look at these, so these are again generated through code, and so there were 10,000 of them, and then they started in 2017. And if you look at the amount of money they are going in, so the largest sale right now is 7.58 million, which just happened in March 2021. And it's going crazy in this. So if you look at, there are different trades. So what they basically do is they write a code where it sort of creates these NFTs, and then everything has a different trade. So if different traits are there, and then it just goes, it's going bizarre. Like, I mean, I can't even say how much money it is going right now. Then there is another project which is again doing a lot of it, where I think basically, so this is also a generated project called as Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is so if you look at it, it says floor price. Floor price is 21 Ethereum. Floor price is basically the minimum price it goes for. So 21 Ethereum, 1 Ethereum is around 2.4 lakhs right now. So 21 into that. So that's the minimum price this Bored Ape Club is going. So these are again generated through an algorithm which is written by the creator, and then he keeps on getting the royalties for every after sale which happens. So they started with 0.1 Ethereum. I'm not sure, but that was the first transaction which happens with them. So there are again 10,000 of them. So you see that what people are doing with the generative art here, and there are a lot of people which are, I wasn't aware of what was this happening. I was completely mind blown by all of this. So, if you look at this thing here again, so if you look at, so there are different platforms which you can go to, which is OpenSea, which is based on Ethereum. There's Foundation, which is based on Ethereum, Rarible, Super Rare, Ethereum WazirX, which is based on BNB. So these are different blockchains. And then there is Hikatnang, which is Tezos. But two of the platform which I wanted to focus on this talk was, which are specifically made for generative artists. They are called Art Blocks. And the second one is Tezos. So the Hikatnang. So the best part about Art Blocks, which I think everyone should go, is, so on Art Blocks, what you can basically do, your P5.js sketch can be uploaded onto this, and so you can have like a maximum output, how much you want to generate through that. You can decide what is the minimum value of it, and all of these NFTs can be what do you call you can put yours. Then there is, one second, I can see this. Wait. Yeah, then there are many people who have code, put their artworks, like their scripts there. So if you look at this one, so it's again so the script which was done here was JavaScript. So this is again an interactive NFT. So if you look at this work here, so if you look at all of this was generated through, I mean, we all are, I guess, familiar with what code can do. So basically that code is put up on a chain, and every time someone tries to buy it, for the next buyer, the script sort of generates the new NFT every time, and people are buying this for a crazy amount of money. So on this platform, so you see that this is all interactive work, which is bought by people. If you see, this is Tyler Hobbs' work, which is currently a hot pick for a lot of NFT collectors, is again written in P5.js. I am guessing a lot of people must be following him on the Instagram already. So this is the script so one script which he has written. Based on that, there are these artworks which are generated by his, work. So if you look at his work right now, if you see the amount it is going for, so if you see that, one second, I can't hide it. How do I hide this? Yeah, if you see recently, highest last sale, yeah. So he is getting, for the secondary sales, his prices are going crazy. I think it's going for around 30 to 40 each. So this one was gone. So for every second transaction, this guy is sort of getting the, like a sale. So it was sold for 650 Ethereum, which is crazy. And so it's, the amount of money here is insane. And then there are a lot of people. There is again few days back, Cassie Reese also minted one of his piece. It got sold out in 10 minutes. So if you see, so it was priced, I was trying to buy it, but I couldn't. It was for 10,000 of pieces. Each of them was priced for 0.01 ETH. So 0.01 ETH into 10,000 of them, into 1,000 of it. So if you multiply, that's around 10, that's around 100 ETH. So he ended up getting that much of money in 10 minutes. So the amount of, it's crazy. So on Art Blocks, so there is a curated section, there is Artist Playground and Factory. There are a lot of things which are happening. Then this is one more, which is one of my favorite projects on Art Blocks, is it's by Hideo. So if it's basically a game which he has minted it as an NFT. So it's actually written in 3JS. So when you click onto it, it loads and you sort of play the game with it. So if you see that, it's sort of, so this is, he's selling it as NFT, and then there are a lot of things which are happening around and then this is going for a lot of money. So I mean, I thought I could probably talk about it, and then probably you guys can go and check that out. So I mean, yeah, that was, And then again on Hicketnunk is one more platform where you can have your zip version of your HTML file and you can upload it and sell it as NFT there. So that is also one of the platform you guys can check it out as a generative artist. Then what will you basically need from if you want to be an NFT artist? You'll basically need a WazirX crypto exchange account. Then you will need a Binance crypto exchange account and then MetaMask. And anyways, but I mean, if anyone wants to get into this, you can, my DMs are open on Instagram, then I can tell you how to go about it. So yeah, I mean, that's been that. I mean, I hope I don't know, I think I did justice to what I was talking, but if you guys have a question, I am open to that. So yeah.
Cool. That was, I think, a much needed intro to NFTs. From all the money. I think for everybody else to also know what's happening in the tech world, I think, and how art is becoming another way. And I definitely feel there's been a lot of artists who have benefited from this, which I think is always a good result at the end of the day. So
yeah, I mean, the best part is we, like, you know, you can make a monetization of it, right? Like generally, like we used to think, I used to think that what is going to be the, you know, the way out for a, like a generative artist or whatever. So basically you're selling your sketch into making money, which is, I think there's nothing, you know, better time than that.
Right. So, and even the Processing Foundation is doing basically one of those. Yes. At none. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, Hicketnunk. So yeah, tomorrow actually they also have an interview of Ben Frey and Cassie Reese is going to talk about art blocks. So that's going to happen tomorrow. So I think that is something which you guys can go and look at. The link is given there. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's all the other conversation which may not be what we can do in this group right now, Vinay, which is definitely like all the critiques of, is this just making famous people more rich, which, you know, seems to be also the way the physical.
No, like if you look at a lot of people which are there on art blogs, not all of them are that famous, but see, in NFT space, it doesn't really matter what is your followers and what are your. So if you look at one of the, if you look at this guy called, I don't know how to pronounce it, but his work goes from Schwalumber Instagram. His called as SH.
Drop the link from Pixelkar in the chat.
Sorry,
you can drop the link in the chat, and I think you can look it up. I also know we are running way past our time, so I definitely don't want everybody Saturday evenings to get stressed while we obsess over NFTs and blockchain. So I think thanks a lot, Pixelkar. I think this was a great introduction. You walked us through a bunch of different examples, and I think the whole aspect of generativeness, which is slightly different from the usual NFT work that I've been seeing, is the fact that you have like a 10,000 series, and so every piece that you're making, or like every edition, is essentially a variation, which I think makes it more interesting for computational artists to try out. All right. Thanks a lot, Pixelkar. This is fun. And obviously, if you have more questions, if you just want more gentler sort of introduction into getting into WazirX and trying some of this out, ping him, and I'm sure he'll be happy to, I think, walk you through it and maybe share some of his work as well that he's been putting there. Cool. We'll wrap it up today with these are talks, with one talk by Allwin, and he's an interaction design student. He's also been doing some great installation experiments, and I'm excited, I think, to see the process behind it. But I know for the talk today, Allwin wanted to specifically talk about an experiment that he did, which was taking sentiments from Twitter and I think making something interesting with it. So I think we won't get a lot of review of his installation work, but you should ping him if you want to know more about it. Allwin, up to you. Tell us what you're showing us.
Yeah. Let me share my screen. Yep. So I'm Allwin. I'm currently an interaction design student at NID Bangalore. So I like to explore internet music and I do physical installations with electronics. So today I'll be talking about an internet experiment, which is basically trying to take sentiments in real time from Twitter using only emojis. So
we all know what is emojis. I don't think we have to give any explanation on that. Like we have a lot of references for emojis, and we literally are the generation which grew up from the different kind of usage of emojis to even the newer emojis or AR based things. So this is a page by Unicode organization. So they have a specific page for how the emojis are used, and they track all the emojis that are used. But these are not in real time. It's a report which came out in 2019. So what is the question I had while starting was how to, like, what can we show collectively as emojis, like, I mean, what can emojis represent when we take out all the emojis that are currently used from the internet. So I looked around the data. So one of the things I stumbled across is this live tracker, which has been counting all the emojis from Twitter from the year 2013. So this is the tracker. So it just basically counts all the emojis. But I wanted to get into the live, like what is happening now. This is a total count. So what I basically did was I tried to build a small meter for myself to understand the current usage. So this is a meter that I quickly made it in basic JavaScript and HTML. So from the time you open, it just starts counting whichever, if the same emoji is being used again, it just increases the font size. So this is something, so by now I could understand, okay, this is the emoji which is more used. These are the emojis which are most used visually. For me, I didn't want the numbers. So, but then this shows what's happening around, but then I want to tell a story now. So I got all the emojis which are happening. So what's the story I wanted to tell? I had a few concepts. So I thought we can categorize them into emotions. Maybe like these are joy emojis, these are fear based, anger based, disgust or sad or something else. And then second one is sentiments, which I ended up doing was putting it as positive, negative, like only the emojis with positive and negative uh, links attached to them. Like all the other emojis I left out because while I was looking at the data, only those emojis were used far more higher than the emojis which are neutral, like say a country flag or something like a number emoji or something. And there are other ways to classify, like the types. Basically in phone, when you open in WhatsApp or something, it's basically the faces, animals, food, travel. These are the categories they themselves put. And one more thing to look at can be location, like from which country which emojis is used or which state. So these were all different ideas I was thinking around. uh, but then I picked sentiments, so whether positive or negatives. I had a bunch of concepts on how to represent those. I ended up using a simple version which is more easy to understand, and uh, like it changes, like it's more glanceable to find the difference between positive and negative rather than comparing individual emotions, like individual emojis which are used. So I'll go to the web page. Yeah. So this is the web page I built. So from the time I open this website, it starts counting all the emojis from this site, but it won't take the whole value. It just takes the snapshot and fixes everything to 0 and then starts counting. So I can tell, okay, now uh, like 64% of the emojis used are negative from the time I open, that is the past 30 seconds, and the negative one stands at 35%. But if I want the total count for the past like 9 years, and this is the one, so I can tell maybe now there is a little bit more negative emojis which are being used than the positive ones. And after that, I started thinking maybe there are pairs which are famous. So this is a pair. This both are crying, but one is positive side and one is negative side. I can see it's going head to head like nearly 50% each. But then when it comes to hearts, there is heart and heartbreak. But so you can tell okay which is uh, winning. So this is the live data from Twitter visualized between emojis. So like my basic thought process was people do use for sentiment analysis, they use some natural language processing or something, but emojis is such a simple thing that can be used uh, to do this. So and then I provided an option where people can choose their own emojis from the top 50 uh, emojis which are used and then have their own contrast between two emojis and compare how they are counted. So this is one. But then like this got me thinking, uh, and like okay, before that I'll just explain how it works. So it takes all the emojis count and starts with 0, and then I only picking the emojis with sentiment and labeling them as okay, this is positive, this is negative, and this is a very personal label, like my biased label maybe, but to me this is more negative and this is more positive. And then I started aggregating these emojis based on uh, whether it's positive or negative, and then started putting the visualization. uh, After this, I thought, okay, let's do something with emojis for a very personal cause. So I took my friends group on WhatsApp. I wrote a Python code. So I basically exported the whole chat, and then I started counting all the emojis from it and took the top five emojis from the group chat, and I just drew it in a postcard and sent it to a few of my friends. So still I'm just exploring okay with WhatsApp emojis what can be done, and that one was from internet. So I have a lot of reference on emojis now. Like if you want, I can share it. Yeah, I guess.
Perfect. I think there's a lot of conversation in the chat about emojis and sarcasm and how
Yeah.
how hard sometimes this could be. Uh, yeah, do you want to share anything else? Like, I know your link, if you could drop in the chat, that'll be great for people to go to.
Yeah.
Fun to think, watch it. It change, I think,
Yes.
every second. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. So this is the live link where you can go and you can have your own emoji contest. And one interesting thing that happened was like during some certain times, like when I went on New Year uh, time, the amount of emojis which were like the positive emojis were more. When something bad happens, like all over the world, like some very big news, when you log in on that particular day, you will actually see, okay, the negative emojis are like will be at least 50% or even more. That was something interesting. I could actually notice after doing this.
That makes sense. Yeah, this is, I think, really interesting. There's been a lot of conversations around trying to make sense of how the world is by some proxy like Twitter emojis, and I do feel like it'll be interesting to see screenshots of how your page looks like on specific days, right? Like
Yeah.
on World Cup Day, and and similar like some sort of sporting event, some new movie launch, and some sort of negative news as well. For sure, I think this is super fun. All right. I think thanks a lot, Allwin. Thanks a lot to all the other people who took out the time to speak. We're now going to spend, I think, the next 45 minutes to do two broad things. And we'll try and keep it quick so that we don't take up more time in everybody's Saturday evening. So the first idea that I had was to do a short breakout room. And then the second that I had was that we could do some sort of pair programming. Considering how the time is, Anushka, do you feel that we should skip the breakout rooms and directly jump into pair programming? And that might be, I think, a more fun activity for now.
I'm not sure. Maybe people can tell in the chat which one they'd want to stick around for, because like pair programming might be something new for a lot of people. They might not feel comfortable.
Cool. So let's do this. Let's first take the ritual of taking like a group photo. So it'll be great if those who are around and can switch on their video cam could switch it on. We'll take a quick screenshot of all of us, and then I think we'll jump into doing both the things as well. Perfect. I think it'll be great to see as many people part of the community, and we'll take one sort of screenshot just to commemorate everybody who's joined in. All right. Last second for people to try out. Cool. What do we do? This is 20 years. What's the best way to talk about 20? Do we do? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's flipped out. Right? Huh, okay. Cool. So we could do this, and I can not do it and try and take a screenshot. In 3, 2, 1. Let's go. 20 years of processing. Perfect. Thank you so much. At this point, I'm going to stop the recording, and we can jump into some conversation.